Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. Now, Miranda, tell me, what is the subject and what is the predicate in this sentence? Come on, you clever girl, you'll do well. Lisa asked the girl, who had been sitting on the table for half an hour and could not make any progress. On the kitchen floor and wall, the afternoon sun was drawing shining, boring squares. It was summer in the midst of that marvelous pairing when the existence of other seasons can be forgotten. The girl was absent-minded, tired. However, with a stepfather like that, it was no wonder the child was nervous all day long. "It's stuffy. I'll open the window," said Lisa, and got up and went to the window. In general, in this one room, where she worked as a tutor, for 3 years already helps the daughter of her best friend with Russian language. It had always been stuffy and dirty and dingy, ever since Miranda Kelly's mom came down with an illness that the doctors had only flailed their arms against, saying to look for money and those who would even take it on. Or better yet, accept it. The case is hopeless. It left the house in a bad way. Lisa and Kelly became friends by chance. They both went to the skating rink one winter, alone, with no idea what to do. What was the right thing to do or how to do it? They went out on the ice, laughing, holding hands. Didn't get crucified. Then it was coffee and pies at a little kiosk here at the rink that they got to talking and found out they had a lot in common. Both were fans of old jazz, hated onions. There were larks in every dish and even, it turns out, lived in neighboring yards. But there were some natural and cool differences between them. Lisa was 3 years older than her newly minted 18-year-old friend. Lisa was from a full, one might say, intelligent family with a mom, a math teacher, a grandmother, a vice principal, and a dad, an art history teacher at the university. Kelly stepped into adulthood from an orphanage and had just gotten an apartment. At times, Kelly felt incredibly lonely because of the way some people treated her due to her background, hurtful and offensive inductions. Unfortunately, even Lisa's family found such people, but she stood up to defend her friend with a mountain and said that she had had enough of giving in to her loved ones and agreed to enter the faculty of philology to devote her life to the Russian language, giving up her dream of becoming a tax collector. That's how Lisa finally defended her right to friendship. She, by the way, supported Kelly in the fact that studying for her is a good choice. There would always be a job. The girls kept no secrets from each other, except for one dark, literally life-altering one. Kelly must and after. Then, 9 years ago, there had been a romance in her life as deafeningly exciting as possible for a first love. He was masculine, strong, bold. Absolutely no match for Kelly, according to her best friend. "I'm sorry, but he's not your daddy," Lisa had said bluntly to Lisa that fateful evening when Kelly had been twirling in front of the mirror, fixing her hair and assessing whether she looked good in a little black dress and a string of pearls, albeit artificial, around her neck. "He loves me and I love him," Lisa replied. I rolled my eyes, because this is not an argument for building a serious relationship. Her friend was like a spell. "He's a bad man from a rich family. But that's just a facade. What's he really like? Do you know what people say about him?" Kelly only shrugged her shoulders. She smiled like a fool and kissed her best friend on the cheek, wishing her good luck goodbye. "He's probably going to propose to me tonight." Ran off on a date that destroyed. Because the next morning, Cindy, as her closest contact, got a call from the hospital. Kelly was in intensive care with severe injuries sustained in a mundane accident. The doctor explained to Cindy that her friend had been beaten and thrown full speed out of a car. Serious injuries touched her entire body. And worst of all, her spine had been hit in particular. They said to prepare for the worst, that she'd be crippled. Except Kelly made an amazingly speedy recovery. But they never found her abuser. He managed to get away, literally fled the country. And then it turned out that Kelly was pregnant, and the doctors unanimously said they had to terminate the pregnancy on the background of traumatic injuries, can lead to catastrophic consequences. It's my baby, Kelly replied, when Lisa, along with doctors, came to convince her to choose herself about her health future. It's a girl, I can feel it, and she's mine, you hear. I'm her mom, and we're going to be okay. And then, after asking to be left with her friend, Kelly forced Lisa to swear that no one would ever know the truth about who the baby's father was. That this is the monster who did this to her, throwing her literally out of her life when she became unwanted. When love was played out, when Kelly was discharged from the hospital, it seemed at first that life was slowly getting back on track. Acquaintances in the shop supported financially. Get well for now. Then, before the birth, still managed to work. And finally, the baby was born. A girl. Lisa asked Kelly to help pick out a name, and they decided she'd be a car. After all, it's an ancient, beautiful, and magical name. Lifting the baby, of course, was very hard. But Kelly was not discouraged. She worked as soon as she could snatch the opportunity of her mother's new everyday schedule. And even when the car turned 4 years old, she met a man named Charles. True, in Lisa's opinion, it was again a bad lot, 10 years older with no living space of his own. Came from a village where the whole family drank. But Kelly said he's a real man who works as a laborer, and the baby needs a father. And then, when it already seemed, well, life is more or less formed, there's nothing to complain about, then suddenly the disease came back. At first it was just back pain. And Kelly thought she'd just broken her back at work. She also cleaned the entrances of the house where she lived. Then her legs started to lose feeling. The doctor said, "What do you want?" Parents after a trauma like that. And they worked hard. And for the last 4 years, Kelly got worse and worse. Now she could barely get out of bed. Cindy, of course, helped as much as she could. But she could see that her friend's life was going badly. And Miranda was a big part of that. Because Charles had lately started drinking beer to begin with, and as if only after work. Then it was replaced by stronger drinks. Lisa even had a fight with him once, sternly demanding that he think about his family. "It's not mine," curved his lips Charles, and piano, and two. But a stranger wanted to call the baby girl something strong, but was afraid. And then alcoholism. Raised a finger aloft. Shaky hands is also a hereditary disease. That's me. I'm still the man of the house, so you stay out of it. What's she doing here? Although I think she's a stupid girl. Miranda, your wife is wasting your money. I don't come to you for money, Lisa replied. She was disgusted. This man, he was not worthy of her friend. In general, such a bright, kinder Kelly should not have happened. Lisa, by the way, the truth, did not take money for preparing the little girl for school and all the other additional activities with her persuaded Kelly to accept the help of someone, and was uncomfortable. Close the window. Charles came into the kitchen. I can't breathe in the apartment. Would you at least mop the floor once in a while? Lisa replied, wash the floors. Are there no women in the house? He pointed his finger in the direction of Miranda, who was sitting on a chair, waiting in a lump. You're a little animal, hoping to escape the eye of the hunter. So rag in her teeth, and off you go. In the village at her age, she can do anything. And this. And then the stepfather, drunk again, spit on the floor, and the princess will learn. But all to no avail, waved his hand, and went to his room. By the way, the room was divided into two parts of the wives' bodies, and in the second half was kind of a nursery. But Miranda went to bed in the kitchen. There was a little couch here. It was all right. The hostess, not paying attention, stroked the Lisa pupil's head. Let's get on with it. What are we doing? Kara is rolling, sailing fast on the blue sea. And I don't know what the subject is, Miranda whispered, tears in her eyes, afraid of her stepmother. Lisa sighed and looked at the words under the picture below, where the sea creature crocodile was drawn. Yes, things had gotten better with school. But Lisa also remembered very well that when her stepfather had gone to the village for a couple of days, she had made great progress. Apparently, it was just hard to learn in the oppressive atmosphere at home. When class was over, Lisa stopped by to see Kelly for a moment. You know how she's feeling. Is there anything I can do to help? Why don't you just go ahead and go? Waving her arms at Charles, who had the news on full volume. He loved watching it. And then he'd go on and on about how wrong the world was. The smart guy's got his life together. Lisa thought in spite and finally left the apartment. Lisa, when I was crossing the courtyard, heading for my place, I called out, "Wait." Lisa, giving my face a friendly expression with a smile. The girl turned around. "Hello, James," the son of my mom's friend's mom and the entire extended family, lashing out at my wife. In general, James was a nice guy. They'd known each other for about 100 years. He worked as a construction foreman, had no bad habits, went to the club. To do boxing was set on a family of children. In short, he was perfect, even cute on the face. But to Lisa's taste, he was bland, predictable, too calm. He didn't give her butterflies, as they say, in her stomach. Awe, delight. Nothing like that. They'd already gone on dates, sweetie, to an Italian restaurant. They even kissed once, and it was nothing. But on the other hand, Lisa knew in her mind that family and marriage should be built not on romantic fantasies and passions, but on mutual respect, trust, and the ability to compromise. James asked how she was. Lisa said she was fine. He volunteered to walk her home. We slowed down and talked about everything. James shared his joy. His mother had bought a second plot of land adjacent to her cottage. There was nothing on this plot yet, but the improvement would come. Lisa listened to his plans about what kind of house he would build as a vegetable garden. They will break up to eat their own organic, and almost dressed and then appeared heir, if such a thing is possible. But it turned out to be possible because James suddenly said, "Marry me." Theoretically, Lisa assumed that a marriage proposal was just around the corner, but right now, specifically, she was in shock. She stopped and slammed her eyes shut. "We can apply at the registry office tomorrow. Would you take my hand on probation?" On my James found himself hot and sweating. The guy was worried sick. He had long been in love with Lisa and could not believe that she was about to become his wife. But I don't doubt this development. My mom's cousin's sister is married to a restaurant owner named Jasmine. They've arranged for the banquet to be discounted. I made it sound like one thing. Lisa and James smiled widely. "I'm so happy. Wait for me." Lisa's hand pulled back and really didn't like it. Feeling driven by circumstances. But that's what was happening now, blossoming with her. But I hadn't said yes yet. James was changing before my eyes. His smile was gone. His eyes were so pitiful, like he'd hurt a child. "Well, that is," she bounced heavily, took to adjusting the nervous purse on her shoulders. She needed to move, to do something different. The anxiety was threatening to be overblown. Probably a panic attack. I need to think. That's what usually happens when you get an offer. Apparently James had heard of it too, that women are supposed to be given time to think. "Okay, well, I'll see you tomorrow." He exhaled a sigh of relief. She nodded. "Oh, and I still have to go to the market. I will help volunteered as a brave knight to accompany." But Lisa waved her hands. "I'm not going to keep you. I have to go to the market for a long time. And then I have to go to the cosmetics store." She was making it up as she went along. She could barely fight it off. She hurried in the opposite direction of the house, so she lived to tell the tale. Now she had to make a decision. But Lisa suddenly realized she couldn't just say what she wanted, could she? Because, well, I don't love him, she admitted to herself, falling almost to a table in the coffee shop. Laughs and eclairs. 3 pieces tossed to the approaching waitress, barely glancing at the menu in Lisa's life, had so far had only one serious romance with a classmate. But they'd broken up without ever really getting close, because suddenly it was discovered that he was a hunter. Lisa couldn't imagine what it was like to stuff stuffed animals in the apartment. Her husband brought the prey to her head. And then somehow her studies spun and her own life, in which it seemed there was no place for men. She understood the excitement of her parents. They wanted to see their daughter happy, to have grandchildren. But it was also suddenly clear to Lisa that this was a marriage. What if it was a mistake? What if it wasn't always like this? Like her grandmother used to say about her marriage. Lisa happily spooned into the eclairs with fat, creamy chocolate custard. Goodbye diet, but she can afford it. Life is like that. Afterwards, Medovic cakes, Napoleon tiramisu were ordered. Lisa just couldn't stop. Finally, over a glass of milk, she asked for the bill. She reached into her purse for her wallet and found another note in it. She unfolded it and frowned. Handwriting. Miranda's was scrawled with misspellings, but what she read made Lisa cringe, apparently afraid to speak openly. After all, her stepfather was always hanging around the apartment. The little girl decided to entrust everything to paper. The fact that Lisa was shocked by a marriage proposal, made hastily and without romance at all. It all receded into the background because it was urgent to save her friend. Lisa came home and helped her mom cook. Tisha had a lesson with another one of her students. Through the web connection, she remotely set her alarm for 7 o'clock. Just yesterday, Kelly cheerfully said that Charles would leave home early because he wanted to take a quick train ride to his home village and come back in the evening. There was something wrong with the sewage system, and he needed to help his parents. And now Lisa has decided to take advantage of his absence to have a serious conversation. This is what your daughter wrote, handed her friend a note the next day. Came, Miranda opened, walked to the room where Kelly was lying, advanced 100 to the bed, and sat down. What is it? Kelly squinted, reading, then rounded his eyes and shook his head. Already she opened her mouth to say something. But Lisa cut her off. Are you saying the kid's making this up? No, I can understand you wanting to keep your family together. But if that's true, there's nothing left to save. The helpless woman's lips trembled as she lay there. Her eyes filled with tears, because the complaints the little girl was saying to her aunt's tutor were true. Charles, indeed, beat mom at home really no to eat, because Charles' salary primarily on herself spent mostly on alcohol more expensive, because cheap, as everyone was told, liver, daycare. Kelly for a long time strengthened, believed that just this is a difficult period of life. After all, she's completely sick, can't work for her husband. All the household chores have fallen, and since there is no money for a caregiver, I had to take care of her. And this, of course, is not always clean. It's psychologically difficult for a man. But then one day on a remark that he did not boil porridge for Miranda for breakfast and for lunch, there was no hot dinner either. Charles, hurt to the point of bruising, grabbed his wife by the arm and fucked her. She screamed that he was a man and making money, that he was tired of messing around with both of them. And then it was as if the husband made a cruel discovery to himself. He could behave like that. He could take out his anger and irritation on his helpless wife, who was not going anywhere. But you can't do that, Lisa said, when her friend had finished confessing how they really lived. You have to do something. You have to break up with him. Break up with him. And then what are you gonna do with me? I'm sorry, she added, immediately realizing how unfair it was to be treated so unfairly by a friend who was always there to help. But I'd be lost without him. I wish I was healthy. By the way, is there anything going on with the funds? Lisa asked. It was her idea, by the way, to sell ads to various fundraising charities. Not really, answered Kelly. The amounts needed were astronomical. And not just for one-time treatment, but for major surgery and long-term rehabilitative care. Charles, well, I thought I'd just tell you how thin it was. Charles said that if I went to the hospital, I wouldn't be with Miranda, that he'd put her in an orphanage. He's my husband. Said he had the right. And Kelly cried. Cindy wanted to cry too, but instead she told her friend that please don't scare the baby with tears. She went into the kitchen, looked in the refrigerator. It was empty. Ran to the store, cooked soup, chicken cutlets, and more charlotte with apple and cinnamon was going to. Actually at home to help my parents put up wallpaper. But she called and said she had to leave for one class, and I didn't regret cleaning up a little bit. It was for a good cause. If she'd said it straight out, they'd have grumbled. Lisa fed lunch to her friend Miranda and could finally get on with what she had to do. The thing was that she had only shown Kelly one part of the note, and she had torn off the bottom part because Miranda had written something unimaginable. Lisa talked to her about it quietly after lunch. "Miranda, how do you know about Aunt Redhead?" "See," said the bully. "Daddy goes to their house. See," he says, sneaking around like a thief. The named Rick was indeed known in the neighborhood yards as a dashing, ill-mannered boy from a dysfunctional family, and his mother raised him alone. Lisa decided that she would not say anything about the possible infidelity of her friend's husband. First, we have to make sure it's not a childish fantasy. Strange isn't a mistake. Lisa found Rick suffering. The kid got behind the garages with his buddies, and they set up some kind of headquarters, lured him out, barely swore an oath. That she wasn't some neighbor with a complaint about broken windows. In fact, she's an acquaintance of the family, Miranda. "What do you want?" The teenager asked suspiciously. Lisa told him what she wanted. "Well, he comes by all sorts of things. His mom's expecting him again tonight at 10 o'clock, so you'll probably tell his wife everything as usual." Yeah, sure. But Kelly is very sick, and she can't be worried. So we need to think about how we're going to handle this. You adults always make everything so complicated. You can come back tonight and see for yourself." And he explained where to find their apartment. Said that if you go in from one side, the house, there are small and bushes in the suburbs, all the way around, or could you then literally peek through the window? Lisa only shook her head. A little spy. But she thought the boy's idea was a great one. "Lisa, where do you get to all day long?" From the threshold of the native apartment, her mother swooped down on the girl and made scary eyes. James came in with a portico, said, "Do you have anything important to say for us?" Lisa almost didn't notice. Here came another trouble. She hadn't even answered him yet, and he was about to announce to everyone at the table that they were going to be married, making again, as she knew how to do, the most welcoming face. Lisa peeked into the kitchen, where they were already packing for 100. "Hello." The move flew to the Mariana Trench. Because James didn't come alone, but with his mom. So it wasn't good at all. Lisa glanced at the clock until hour X, when she was to become a bit of a spy. There was still a decent amount of time left. Ducking down the street was unrealistic, weird for the homies, and it would mess up the weather too. So she had to stay. Lisa changed her clothes, washed her hands, sat down at the table, turned on all her eloquence. She tried with all her might to lead the conversation into the wilds, further distant marriages, and the like, and it was working. Then James suddenly caught her hand again and smiled so big that he almost melted like an ice cream cone in the sun from his own happiness. Lisa felt on her back. It's a boom, a panic of goosebumps. I had Kelly forget this phone, made up a lie on the fly, and pleaded to no one in particular that my phone her ringtone, which all the household knew would not ring inappropriately. Lisa now. James reached for her, but she had already jumped up and gone into the other room. She got ready to go out as quickly as ever, without even waiting for the elevator. Because the drive seemed to be boiling in her blood, she ran down from the 10th floor on foot, jumping over the steps in places. The rain had stopped, but the wind was chopping viciously, sharp with damp gusts. Lisa framed her face against it with a squeeze. How good is she? She'd think about marriage. James wasn't a bad guy after all. She'd be like a stone wall behind him. Maybe it's his love that'll keep the marriage together for life and never cheat, never hurt. And the fact that she doesn't love. Maybe that's nothing to married life. Immersed in contradictory thoughts to herself, Lisa reached the right place. She pulled out her phone, turned on the video recording, and quietly walked up to class. The windows did indeed appear to be low, and the fact that there was a vent open allowed her to hear what was being talked about in the room. There was a red-haired woman, the mother of Vitya and Charles. They were sitting at the table and drinking tea, talking. And what Lisa heard came as a shock. It turned out that Charles had been hoping that Kelly would get worse soon, and then, citing the fact that he couldn't provide her with proper care, he was going to put her in some boarding school. What a bastard. Lisa, gritting her teeth. Charles was also rudely dismissive of his stepdaughter, and he was going to take the kid somewhere too. Boarding school. So Charles wanted to become the sole tenant and outright landlord. Too bad there's no way to sell it. But maybe I'll think of something, as the drinking buddy added at the end of his revelation. Heard and seen and captured, but on the camera was enough. Lisa quietly descended the hillside, got out of the bushes. It turned out to be a briar bush, clinging mercilessly to her new dress. What kind of day is this? The girl was indignant, assessing the damage to her clothes, but then laughed nervously at Kelly and her problems. That's who's in real trouble. And the main thing is not clear what to do, how to help. Lisa came home feeling very upset. It took you so long to get the phone. Yeah, she met her mother again on the doorstep. The apartment was quiet. James, my daughter, what are you doing? What the hell is that? What's the state of your clothes? Said the parent, seeing the state of your clothes. Just a little walk in the park, and got caught up. But don't start with James. I'll do the talking. Why did he leave? He didn't want to leave. He wanted to wait for you, but Clara said they had to go. Holly, don't make him angry. The mom-to-be also told me what he said. So it's clear that you're getting married. Who is clear? Give all you, daughter. Didn't you realize James, your husband? Lisa rolled her eyes. Now Mom sounded like some kind of educated, cultured grandmother. So let's drop this conversation. After all, he's the one who wants to marry me, right? So the decision to make me not too polite, but from the bottom of my heart, replied Lisa. We sighed heavily and shook our heads, but did not say anything more on the subject. We do the dishes, though. It's your turn. Lisa agreed with that. Hands on something while your head is thinking, what's the next step? It turned out to be very useful and sedative for the nervous system the next morning. Lisa wasn't ready to talk to her friend, but she just couldn't find the right words and couldn't imagine how Kelly would live with that awful truth. And if you tell Charles, how will he behave then? Lisa decided to take some more time to prepare some plan. She started to get ready for the next student's class. In general, Lisa always crossed the road strictly on the green and on the zebra. But this time, the bus was delayed because of a breakdown on the route. The students' parents were the kind of people who would change one little thing. Lisa was in a hurry and decided that if she ignored the rules carefully, nothing would happen. And so even though the light was red, she dashed across the street. She won a minute there. She'll be on time. But it didn't work out. And to blame for everything was a thin, high heel of the new torpedo, which got stuck in the grate, literally half a meter from the sidewalk. Lisa started twitching her foot, then turned around at the shrill signal. Eyes widened as a huge black SUV sped straight toward her. She had time to think she could decipher the shoes and free herself. Also had time to think there was no time for that. I squeezed my eyes shut, having time to think one more thought, that it seemed that life should be all flashing before my eyes at such a moment, and she was being silly. And then there was a squeal of brakes. The SUV stopped lightly, poking the girl's blunt nose literally in her legs. Just a little more, and the irreparable happened. Lisa cautiously opened her eyes. Are you sick of living? And immediately met her gaze with the fury of the driver's eyes. Oh, said the girl to herself. When the big man in a leather jacket loomed over her, he had powerful square jaws, but with Rybinskaya unreal blue eyes. Black hair, raised in a fashionable in the manner of the 60s hairstyle up. Stupid, sharp in the face, wearing the fresh copper breath. Lisa felt some strange thrills and goosebumps walk down her back at the proximity of that word. Exactly the Viking of the giant. Then suddenly recognition came. She'd only seen the man who'd broken her friend's life once, but it was that face that was memorized, and now it was right above her. Lisa acted as if on instinct. Her hand flew upward and clashed ringingly. The man pranced. She touched herself on the cheek, then looked down at her palm in surprise. Right there could show in ink the explanation of the deed, almost knocked down by him to the stranger. Scoundrel, I shouted at him and wanted to come at him with my fists and with my handbag, but I forgot that I was stuck, aghast, and awkwardly began to fall. He picked me up. He held her, naturally, in his arms, so she forgot how to breathe. Young lady, calm down. I'm sorry. Are you okay? Are you in pain? Yes, it's my fault. But let's not fight. She's read herself. Why'd you run? I was just a stream of words. And she looked with all her eyes and did not understand why it is so difficult to curse this monster on the spot. Let me go, she whispered. And he gently let her go. Crouched down, grabbing her leg, I deftly turned Koba's leg, so that the heel slipped out of the bars. I had to lean on the man's shoulders to keep my balance. I hate you, I said coldly, as frozen by the word when he took the man for margarine, but then suddenly grinned unkindly too. For running the red light yourself, you fool. No, you're not. You ruined my friend's whole life. And Lisa, always so strong, who never went out of her way for a word, was suddenly torn. You asshole, you're her. She had a baby girl. You're finished. We're gonna get you for what you did. And then she went on to say everything she thought. Okay, stop. Shut up. You either ordered me to or you asked me to. I didn't do anything, Kelly, because my name is Rick, and you're talking about Mason. That's my brother. What brother? You look just like him, don't you? Well, it's not my fault we're twins. Lisa couldn't believe it. The man walked back to the car, came over, and held out his passport again. See, I have a different name. Lisa stood frowning, trying to put this puzzle together. She remembered. Kelly had actually said that her boyfriend had a twin brother, only they didn't get along. I'm sorry, sighed convulsively and wrapped her arms around herself. I was wrong. Yeah, but it's been worse. A brother's legacy. The sky, meanwhile, had clouds somewhere waving in the sky and asphalt. Then the first drops. All right, give me a minute. I'll park properly and we'll talk about it. There's a cafe over there, waving at the sign. Will you tell me what happened there? 'Cause I didn't get it. Lisa agreed. They went in, sat down at a table. They ordered a cup of this flavorful drink. But Lisa didn't even touch her cappuccino. She stared intently at the man across the table. Definitely not. Rick rolled his eyes. How else to prove it? No, I'm not Mason. He is. He's dead. What? The car accident 9 years ago. He was in China then and decided to race on the track for a bet. If that's... well, that's the case. He was a real piece of work, but he was a brother. So what happened? You said he had a kid. Yes. Nodding, Lisa finally sipped her coffee and told the short story of how Kelly had fallen into a vicious affair, how she barely survived, and had decided to keep the baby at the cost of her own health. About how she was suffering now. Rick listened attentively, only occasionally asked short questions. I don't know anything about it, he replied. And for some reason Lisa believed him. I was in New York at the time, and I was still in school. Then I was told that Mason had gotten into some kind of trouble and had left the country. They said he'd given up everything. I came back 2 years after that. My father handed me the business. That's how she's been getting out all these years. I had a niece living in the neighborhood, and I didn't know it, so slammed his palm on the table. So it was just fate that brought us together. I was supposed to leave for Italy tomorrow, but it turns out I'll have to stay late. Business can wait. Or she said no. So, what are we gonna do? I don't know, Lisa shrugged. What do you mean you don't know? Well, you can't leave it like that. It's complicated. The girl already regretted her frankness. After all, this Rick, though he made a nice first impression, was still in the Singh family. And if even half of the rumors about them were true, they were clearly not people who could be trusted. Lisa suddenly thought about the fact that maybe it was not favorable for them to have a woman who had a child with such a person. In case they, well, I mean Rick's relatives would take the whole story hostilely. Theoretically, if Kelly had a different temperament, she could try to get them to support her and her child, all be born out of wedlock. In fact, from what Lisa knew of the Smith family, they didn't give a damn about their personal reputations. But still, maybe it wasn't for nothing that her friend begged her to keep Miranda's origins a secret. What's the big deal? Rick smirked and leaned back in his chair. We moved the child's mother to us, and that's it. Where to us? Lisa asked cautiously. Well, home. They can't go on living unsupervised with Charles. Rick looked at her strangely. It's like blood. No. What are you talking about? Kelly's not a thing to be taken and transferred. She didn't want anyone to know about it at all, much less Smith. She added quietly. Now Cindy was beginning to think she had missed something in her perception of Rick. There was something dangerous about him, something that just made her instincts scream. Run. I have to talk to her. Explain that I met you. Tell her you're offering to help, and that's the way it's going to be. Finished decisively and stopped in passing. The waiter slid in with a tray, asking for the bill. My treat. Threw carelessly Rick, and it didn't escape the girl that he was literally considering her without any shyness. Thank you. But I'm so not used to the city, dropped her chin and left the bills for coffee, plus the waiter for tea. And for nothing. It's as if the man is deliberately provoking intimacy. A girl this pretty shouldn't. And this is where you're overstepping your bounds. Lisa nervously put on a jacket, tangled in the sleeves, sagged under the nose. That's it. I'll call you when I'm going to go out. Did you forget your phone? Rick stopped her with a sneer, and there it was. I wanted to slap him again, but I had to go back and really exchange numbers. When the girl left, the lecturer looked thoughtfully out of the window for a few minutes. Then he dialed the number of the man who had repeatedly helped him out of the most difficult and sometimes risky situations. Boris, are you free? You know, we have a problem. Lisa, of course, was late for class and had to cancel it altogether. And the students' parents said that in principle such a sluggish tutor could not teach anything worthwhile, and so they no longer needed Lisa's services. Before the next lesson, there was about 4 o'clock to eat, take a nap, and go home. Lisa had been chronically sleep-deprived the last few days. It was definitely not enough considering the traffic jams on the roads. So we had to pass the time at the mall. And then, when I circled it for the 3rd time at the city library, where Lisa checked out the first book she could find, it turned out to be a novel. A paperback about a duke and an innocent waif. She opened it to find she didn't want to read it, and she plunged into her thoughts. What did she know about these Smiths? Nothing she'd deliberately learned about them. Well, she'd heard about them here and there. Seems they owned a few businesses in the area, and they were rich in the country, except that Jacob, the father of the family, was said to have made his fortune in the Nenities in a far from honest way. And Noah had raised his son alone. At least Noah had raised him abominably. Or so Lisa thought. Evil in a person can initially exist. No matter how you raise him, there was more. So it was known that Smith owned some business abroad. In Italy, the same Noah was involved in a dirty story, it seems, connected with smuggling something there. He shrugged. Lisa glanced at her watch. Well, it was time. We can go to the student. And for the nuances of electively punctuation marks, forget all about it. The next day, having gotten a moment when Charles wasn't home, he left for work. Lisa stopped by her friend's house, determined to have a conversation. The car, naturally, to protect children's ears from the serious subject, was sat down to watch cartoons, and to be safe, was provided with a bowl of cookies and a cup of cocoa. Kelly, as expected, took everything hard. It cost Lisa a lot of work to calm her friend down and tell her to hang in there. When it was revealed that her first love and abuser had died, Lisa told a small lie because she didn't believe it herself, and tried to convince her friend that if the man knew he had a daughter, He would surely repent and realize what a horrible person he was. Lisa said all this to bring the conversation to the next topic: the offered help from Rick. At first, Kelly had desperately rejected her and didn't need anything. Lisa had to be cruel and say straight up, "Well, what don't you need?" Health to be. "Stop it all, I can't do this to you anymore. You're Charles. He's not a husband. He's just as nasty as Mason." "No, don't say that." It was Kelly first. But Lisa just handed her the phone and showed her the secretly recorded tape. Then she hugged her tightly and looked into her eyes and told her to hold on, because she couldn't do otherwise, and she couldn't act inconsiderately either. It was therefore in no way possible to tell Charles that his evil plans were already known to everyone. The wise thing to do would be to lay low, to see what use could be made of Smith. Yes, it is Mason who has ruined your life, but my opinion will not change. Help should and can be accepted at least as compensation, including moral compensation. It just so happens, girlfriend, that you have to choose between two evils. Think about your daughter. You'll get back on your feet. No one is forcing you to be friends with these wolves. Lisa smiled slyly. "I'm just taking advantage of the help. And then goodbye. You'll live independently with your daughter without any idiots." That was the end of their decision. Going out to her friend's house, Lisa, taking advantage of the fact that it was a day off, went to the beauty salon still a week ago signed up, decided to change the brown in hair color, and hair by a fashionable coloring called California Appellation, with which hair seemed as if in the burnt sun, but looked beautiful. On the way, Rick called, saying they needed to meet and talk. It was agreed that he would drive up to the park. The weather was beautiful. "We could talk there too. It looks good on you." "So, first," said Rick, when she got to the appointed time and answered and thought she really shouldn't care what this guy thought about her altered style. They walked the field of the park, and Lisa relayed, naturally, only partially the outcome of her conversation with her friend. Rick said that it was not a problem to find the money, and moreover that doctors could get it here even abroad. "You don't have to go far," Lisa said. He shrugged. And then the topic turned to her own person, strangely unnoticed. Cindy told him who she was, what she did for a living. Cindy realized that this was not the point of the conversation. She was embarrassed, angry at Rick because he'd started it first. "Lisa, hello." It was James' voice, the groom, chosen unanimously by all the family except the bride. He had crept up unnoticed, literally ducked out from behind the bushes, and now looked confused. Somehow he reminded me of Owl, good-natured, and a little clumsy. "Who's that acquaintance of yours?" "Name's Rick, and this is James. He's a friend of mine," she answered, but averted her gaze because she couldn't bring herself to say it. "As everyone said her fiancé can't reach you," gently rebuked James. "My mom is asking for you hi to her." Lisa bent over, picking a gray dandelion off the ground. "Why aren't you getting a haircut?" "Mom always said hair is long. It's your jewelry. You know it's my hair, and I do what I want with it. What about you? Did you go outside with your mom?" "I asked permission to go for a walk." She was being snide. "I'm sick of it. It's all about your mom. Everything has an opinion. I'm done." She tossed the dandelion to the ground and pushed it on top of him. Rick, on the other hand, completely unashamed, smirked, almost insulted. "Yeah, boy run. Who are you anyway?" "James, I've never seen Lisa so annoyed before. Why are you even bothering with the bride?" "What about the bride?" Rick and bent over, struggling, and suddenly caught Lisa's hand up to her lips and kissed her gallantly, but with a frank and predatory look in his eyes. "Accept my congratulations." Lisa was at first dumbfounded. Goosebumps danced down her back. Then her cheeks flared up, and she practically shouted, "I have not yet answered whether I agree and leave me alone." Both turned and ran out of the park. Lisa, James followed, but Rick stopped him by the shoulder. "Caught, she wants to be alone. Don't you get it? You've never been in a fight in your life, James, but now you want to." He didn't like this familiarity with Lisa that he hadn't seen before. He didn't like the way he kissed the girl's hand and the way she looked at him. He felt kind of uneasy and uncomfortable in general. Stay away from her, Kino as menacingly as possible, and walked out of the park as well. Rick grinned. Just the last thing he wasn't going to do by any means. Lisa was very interesting to him, and now not just as the girlfriend of his big, sudden problem. However, he did not doubt that this problem was solvable, because so far, whatever happened to the Smith family in the end, in one way or another, with greater or lesser losses, and not at all on their part, but everything was solved. Literally, the next day Rick showed up at Kelly's house. Again, they decided together that the most favorable contact, so to speak, was to begin. If Charles would not be around, and so it turned out, he was at work. Rick came with a bouquet of flowers, but after their meeting, Kelly asked Lisa to take Lisa with her, because how could she explain their appearance to Charles? Kelly had wanted to cancel the meeting the day before, to give up everything altogether and not understand how, but to deal with everything on her own. But the case was such that it became clear without the suddenly appeared, like an oasis in front of the wandering in the desert support Rick cannot do without. The thing was, Charles came home drunk. He said he had been reprimanded at work and might be fired altogether. Kelly asked her husband to stay put as best he could. After all, the end of summer was coming and Miranda had to go to school, and nothing had been packed or bought for her yet. But Charles angrily replied that he's the man of the family and he'll decide everything himself. He added that kids are so spoiled nowadays that they can still buy notebooks, all the uniforms, a new backpack is a pampering and a fool's errand. Then he said it quietly, apparently thinking he wouldn't hear. His wife added that he was tired of raising someone else's girl, but he didn't stop there. In the evening, Miranda asked if he would buy yogurt for her. Charles yelled at the girl that they would put her on bread and water, and then she would know how to appreciate a piece and stop whining. That's why Rick Kelly was fishing out of greed. First, I made arrangements with a local clinic. There are some very good specialists here in town. They work miracles, by the way. Well, if you don't mind, you can come in tomorrow for a checkup. Kelly was so quick to marvel. Well, money opens different doors, Rick shrugged. But I need to talk to Sophia. She's our neighbor. She looks after Miranda sometimes. Lisa nodded. I'd look out for tomorrow myself. I have 2 classes. An option, of course, but I can offer babysitting services. No, come on, what are you? That's too much. Kelly objected. And then it's a stranger. And the neighbor, do you know her well? But that's different, Kelly replied. She realized that in her situation such an unexpected care and warning from Rick was a real rescue. But on the other hand, she was uncomfortable taking all this help in an unsettling way. When Rick left, Kelly talked to her friend some more and enlisted her support in breaking the news to Charles. And we decided, by the way, to say that it wasn't a very distant acquaintance who was helping. We moved the conversation to the next day in the morning, because then we have to go to work again. And if we talked in the evening, he would have plenty of time to object, express his opinion, or even make a scandal. Fortunately, Charles only listened and did not even say anything. He waved his hand at the useless, in his opinion, the idea of treatment, and went to work. There again, there was a shortage of goods, and the bosses were looking for someone to blame. The examination took a long time. Kelly thought that she would have to wait several days for answers, but to her surprise, the head doctor of the clinic immediately gave his prognosis that restoration of normal body condition was possible if treatment was started soon. Do not worry about the operation, assured the patient. We have everything to conduct it at the level of the best clinics in America and Europe. Now we need to do some additional tests, and we can set a date. I think, taking into account everything plus the rehabilitation period by the new year, you will already be able to try to make your first step. Really? Kelly marveled. Tears came to her eyes. When did she ever imagine she could be healthy? Going for walks with her daughter. Then one day, as she dreamed, even go to the sea with her and splash on the waves. She immediately pulled herself together. The sea is far away. The main thing is just to get healthy. Lisa's thoughts in the last few days were occupied with the fate of her friend. There was almost no time for herself. However, it did not care much. Everything in the girl's life had long been subordinated to the usual routine. Classes with students, a little fitness, watching her favorite TV series, plus revision and above, and also household chores. What kind of personal life is there? Even if the relatives seem intent on getting you married as soon as possible. AP, are men in short supply? Lisa asked, carefully, without rushing. Are you molding another jam and cottage cheese? On the day of their big molding, the family gathered at the table and did not do without the topic that unnerves Lisa. No, of course not. It's just that, Mom, and I think James would be a good husband for you. And what I think is of any interest to anyone at all. I'm not arguing. James is a great guy and really would only make a good husband for someone else, I guess. Why? Why don't you like him? Lisa's mom backed up her dad. Well, there's just no spark, the girl answered honestly. Ah, granddaughter shook her grandmother's head. A spark is dangerous. It happens, but how can a fire happen? Lisa froze, noticed that the dress wet hibernation bored and dumplings to mold. And about the groom to talk about everything. I've had enough of half-finished products, said getting up and growing palms. I'm gonna go see Kelly. Will you do something with her? A grown married woman. Mom was outraged. Age and marital status are no barrier to friendship, shouted Lisa, already out of the bath. To wash her hands was the way to go. But in reality, Lisa didn't go to her friend's house, but to a completely different address. And she decided to do it without warning, because she wanted to see in person and find out where her friend was theoretically going to live. The fact that it would be better to move out of the house where the husband aggressively cheats under the nose of his wife and is up to no good was no longer in doubt. Let me in to see Rick Smith. Can you tell me Lisa's name? Businesslike reported into the intercom outside the mansion, located in a picturesque, ecologically clean neighborhood of the city. But I guessed right. The gate was opened by a guard, who was very suitable to play bulldogs in the play, because he was very solid and scowling with an expression on his face. After greeting the unexpected guest, the guard led her to the house. Lisa noted approvingly the small manicured garden outside and the stylishly, but not insanely golden, as in the homes of some rich people, as she'd seen on the shows, the furnishings inside. Hello. Suddenly, a melodious girlish voice sounded, and a pretty blonde girl of about 20 years old came out into the hallway to Cindy and the guard. She was dressed in a scarlet mini dress. Hello, Lisa answered and wondered who it was. Rick had said that her father and his second wife were the same age. We maid was not a good-looking woman either, so there's only one possibility. It's Rick's girlfriend. Well, that's expected. So Lisa, no one talks about you and this Kelly. I'm glad you came. I was thinking of coming to you guys for the blonde's territory. Why would you come? To meet a relative and her best friend. Too naive for Rick's girlfriend, the blonde replied. Oh, I didn't introduce myself. My name is Clara. Liam, she addressed the guard. You're free to go. And turned to the guests again. Come on, Rick in the backyard. Cindy, the blonde, didn't like the overly colorful name. What a lovely name, too. Thought she'd gone. What I was wearing to make dumplings. And now, as it is uncomfortable for knitwear on the dress, sweater with stretched into shorts, and it's all for nothing. And what she honest person to be embarrassed in the company of these measures to think she did not have time. Because, having passed through several rooms, she went out to the backyard and found herself in a small cozy garden, in the center of which in a small corral stood a horse of fantastic golden color. And beside him on his knees Rick, he was examining the animal's leg and speaking to it affectionately. I didn't think these ILs could be like that. He rebelled repeatedly. That's it. It won't hurt now. You'll stand quietly. Almost everything is already animal doctor. The blonde in red called out to him and waved his hand. You've got a visitor here, actually. Rick stood up. He looked imposing. It was the first time Lisa had seen him without his jacket. For the warm weather, the man in jeans wore a simple black t-shirt, emphasizing all the muscles of his torso and arms. Hi. He smiled at Lisa and said not expected, but glad. What are you doing here? Yes, here is thinking about the proposal to change the place of residence and wanted to see what you can offer my friend. She answered. It is important. And the same thing became as mixed. Here are a dozen more of these options to choose from. So that's great. Clara clapped his hands. Don't doubt it. My brother will take care of your friend and me. Anyway, it's all terrible. I sighed. You've got to move on. Kelly and daughter certainly deserve the best. Brother. Lisa gasped. You're his sister. Yeah. What did you think? He just didn't say he had a sister. But just a sister. That's my brother. The one who's a bun and sings the female gender. So I'm going to go carefully. I've got things to do. She winked at Lisa. So you are not only a millionaire, a businessman, a sportsman, but you also deal with horses? Asked Lisa, looking around at everything but the man's definitions. I'm not an athlete, just good genetics, replied Rick, and pulled out of his jeans pocket apple split in half. One part he handed to the girl you can treat at once. She loves it. Well, if so, taking the juicy fruit, stretched out carefully, in the palm of her hand, and awed when the horse picked up the treat with soft, velvet lips. What had happened to her? She hit a piece of iron sticking out of the ground. It was my fault. I should have been more careful where I was going. But she's fine now. Actually, she's an old lady. But as you can see, she's in good shape, my first and only horse. He stroked the animal's neck. My father told my brother and me that there are 2 gifts for New Year's Eve, a horse and a car. Mason chose the second one. I got one. And then their fingers met on silkwood, and it felt like a tiny bolt of lightning struck. Lisa took her hand away and stared down at the toes of her shoes in embarrassment. I actually came here to talk about Kelly. Since you're offering your patronage, it seems silly to turn it down. You don't think Kelly's stupid at all. It's just everything that's happened. Everything that's happened in the last few years. It's really affected her, and I don't want to. I can't let her make the wrong decision because of me. I understand. So you're sort of her representative. All right, Mr. Representative. Ask questions, make terms, we'll negotiate. It was said lightly, jokingly even. But Lisa knew the conversation was going to be serious. Kelly had come to terms with her position over the years. And if in nature there were some stages, which, according to the theory of many psychologists, a person who got into a difficult, nightmarish life situation should go through, she had overcome them in a flash, quickly, being on humility. It wasn't the kind of resignation that seemed to make the world seem black and white, and you didn't care about anything or anyone. Kelly simply decided to let go of the past, not to let it bother her anymore, and to focus on the only and truly important thing, the baby. It was her daughter that was the motivation to get her health back and work harder. It was Miranda who kept the discouragement at bay. True, now it was also necessary to recognize names in great and better motives. Kelly had made many mistakes, and chief among them was her marriage to Charles. Now, after a long time, she realized that she married him out of desperation, because it seemed, well, who else needs her? Orphanage without education of the highest with a child in her arms, and even sick. So she took Charles as a savior, and all his shortcomings from stinginess to neglect, sometimes even contemptuous rudeness to himself, passed by. I thought if it wasn't too bad, it would do. It won't get any worse. But it turned out it could be worse. And now Kelly was just scared. For her daughter. And a little bit for herself. But that fear had only possessed her in the past few days. And now, when a man appeared in her life, outwardly a point of support, a copy of the one who ruined her life in character and intentions, It seems his exact opposite. Now the fear has receded. It was replaced by hope that there is justice in the world. No, Kelly did not expect any fantastic gifts from fate for what she had suffered in the past. But she was timidly hoping that things would just work out, so that she could be a healthy mom to her daughter, that they could make a life for themselves. A peace in the world. Kelly thought that apparently the white streak had begun when Lisa came to her and told her about being at the Smith house. Talked to Rick about everything. Also met his sister, and she seems like a really nice girl. Kelly, however, remembering how Charles had argued again in the morning, that with the needs of an invalid's wife, you'd have to spend your whole life on medication. I agreed that it was better for her to move out. So we're packing. I'll call Rick and have him pick it up. So Charles is already at work until tonight, right? Lisa was a little confused that they weren't moving out, but rather running away. But it was the only option since she didn't want any scandal at all. And how adequate is Charles? I didn't want to find out in practice. Where are we going? Miranda asked, excitedly, watching Aunt Lisa hurriedly putting all her small belongings into a travel bag. The girl stood nearby, hugging a plush white snow bear with a pink bow around its neck. It had been a gift from Rick to visit Mommy's friends. Explain to Lisa what would basically even be true. Why won't he come with us? Gingerly asked the girl, and in front of her eyes just blossomed when she found out that he wasn't. There are horses there, Lisa said. Rick will probably let you ride it. They even have a garden with flowers. How am I gonna get to school? I only know how to cross one street. Suddenly, I remembered the girl's upcoming schooling. They'll probably drive you by car, or you'll just go to another school. We'll think of something. You'll need all the toys for sure, asked Lisa with a doomed, wistful network, looking at the shelves, filled with all sorts of stuff, and even in the drawer of toys was piled. Much needed and books needed. And the lamp poked the marketeer with its finger. Rick of the month. It's all clear with you, sighed Miranda. Lisa shook her head and went to find some boxes to pack it all properly. Charles had no intuition. It just happened to be that day and got off work early. Where do you think you're going? He realized his wife wasn't going to the clinic with her daughter and so much stuff. But what pissed Charles off the most was that Kelly was being held in his arms by some stranger. I don't care if the wife was singing about people she knew, but that's not the point. It's a stranger being held by some stranger. It wouldn't even be jealousy anymore. It would be creative anger. Charles, I need treatment. It was uncomfortable to speak in that position. Kelly thought that her crutches had already been put away in the parlor. In fact, Rick was going to put her there. But Charles, what a bad time to show up. It would have been better if they'd just explained everything to him on the phone. I'll stay at a friend's house for a while. It'll be better for you. I won't trouble Galia, so I'm working. What did she think? Confused with him, already calmed down. Your wife is in good hands, said Rick, and he sent a smile that made her even angrier. But he also gave me the look that said to stay out of it. It's dangerous. There were a few neighbors nearby, and they were naturally interested in what was going on. Come on, you guys, calm down. Lisa Kelly is an adult and can decide where she wants to live. Where's the baby going? I'm not letting my daughter in. Clinging to the possibility of control. Charles. And you adopted her? Rick suddenly asked. Who are you? I choked with indignation. Charles. I ask you again, did you adopt the girl? No, but there's no need to get involved. Your voice is clearly not decisive with a smirk. Rick is as easy as the market and careful to knit porcelain. Set Kelly up in the auto shop, especially after the fact that on the apartment of his wife opened his mouth and mistress's floors below, said Charles added. And without saying anything else, he got into the driver's seat. Lisa and Miranda were already in the cabin, the former in the front passenger seat, the latter next to her mother in the back. The neighbors had heard everything, and now they were so friendly they were rolling over on Charles. He's very brave. He suddenly felt more humiliated and insulted than ever before. You shouldn't have said that, Lisa said. You have to put them in their place, Otherwise, they become greyhounds, Rick replied. But he's my husband, said Kelly. We have to call him right away. What about me? What have you done? She continued indignantly. I'm sorry, it's none of your business. Miranda belongs to our K. Smith family, which means her family. And especially whatever happens to her mother is our business. Calmly, but in a matter-of-fact voice, Rick said, Did you make the right decision in agreeing to your husband moving in? I admit that this man may have positive qualities, but I admit it is purely out of respect for you. But he's clearly not the best company. Now, when you need to get back on your feet. Upon arriving at the mansion, Rick let Kelly take a few steps on her own. But then, seeing how hard it was for her, he told her to conserve her strength and picked her up in his arms again. Lisa walked from the summer, Miranda with her tail on her. She greeted the new arrivals with a brightly colored welcome home banner in the hallway and tossed confetti in the air. Lisa thought it was too much, but Kelly, which rarely happened to her, smiled, and the familiarity of Rick's sister in general was clearly something she enjoyed. The luggage from the car was immediately taken up by one man, Timer, who was introduced as someone like a butler and someone to go to for anything. It also turned out that there was a scary maid Tatiana in the house. The two youngest are Christina and Kathy. There are 3 rooms prepared for Kelly, 1 bedroom for her, a second for Miranda, and an even larger room on the semblance of a hall. And they were all adjoining. Whatever you need, just say the servants are warned that you are our queen, smiled Rick as he lowered Kelly onto the couch in the living room. Thank you. Embarrassed, she replied back. I'll try not to give him too much trouble. Since when did caring become that name? How about we switch to you? And getting consent, he continued, I just want to make your stay and Miranda's too most comfortable. And my father agrees with me completely. Lisa, does Uncle Rick have a wife? Asked a question out of the blue, Miranda asked. When Lisa took the girl from the living room, show her room. Here, by the way, was there anything to be surprised about? Everything was decorated in white sky blue and pink colors. The crib was not simple, but in the form of a carriage with golden wheels, with a transparent floor and funny plush unicorn. God, Miranda, as she saw all this splendor, lived to squeal with a squeal of amazement, lost the gift of speech. And then she asked this weird question. Well, I guess not. Why are you asking a little girl? Just like that, the girl answered and ran off to look at the room. In general, it would be possible to praise Rick, of course, for being so prepared for the arrival of the little girl. But on the other hand, it was too much of a fortune to spend, and all for the reason that you were blazing with kindred feelings for your suddenly acquired kinsman. It seemed strange to Lisa. Not that she didn't believe in people's kindness, but it was alarming. Finally, when she helped her friend get settled in her new place and questioned her in detail about everything about the treatment she had planned for the near future, Lisa was able to leave the Smith home to return to her own place. She had a lot of classes waiting for her with her students. She also had to figure something out with James. The phone was ringing off the hook with his phone calls. When Kelly woke up the next morning, she didn't immediately realize where she was. And when she remembered, she lay there for a few minutes just watching the sunbeam on the wall as it froze and took in the new and amazingly prosperous reality. It was hard to believe that now she had been given the opportunity to live in comfort, to be cared for. Rick had been given the opportunity to choose a few professional dialogue, that society that would be most suitable, and Kelly. Oh, it was a difficult choice, and in general it was kind of timid to use everything that this person was ready to give. But one could not say that about Miranda. My daughter was delighted with her new life. She liked that Rick really let her ride the horse. Naturally, the step he led the mare under the reins, and liked the room where she felt like a little princess, and the fact that you could get at least pancakes, soft cream waffles, or cheesecakes for breakfast. You're spoiling her for me. Kelly shook her head. She and Rick were sitting in the garden. He had suggested tea on such a warm and bright day outdoors. On the table, in addition to everything for tea, there were also papers from the clinic. One had to familiarize oneself with the proposed treatment package. "I think we agreed on you," smiled Rick. He looked at the young woman so intently that she was embarrassed. "Yes, of course, she'll be so amused. Is it the least I can do? But you don't have to." "You're wrong. You know, I just believe in fate, that many things in our lives happen for a reason. And so far, that belief hasn't failed me, Kelly, unexpectedly." "So, Nolan took her hand. "Yeah, he's touched her before. And that's when you have her in your arms. But it was different now. I will do anything to earn your trust and forgiveness for what my brother did. You're not responsible for him." I opened my eyes and was struck by how strangely my own heart froze for a moment. Such an amazing feeling that hadn't happened in a long time. It had never been with Charles, and I wanted it to happen again. But then there's the scarecrow. "I'm glad you can see me as a different person. And yet we're family, and I want to be there for you when you take your first steps, when you're healthy." Kelly smiled and turned away, pretending to regard the late cello picking nectar from the purple rose. The next few weeks merged into one unbearably long time, because agonizing despite all the doctor's favorable prognosis. The unknown. Kelly, although she wished more than anything to become healthy, was very tired of examinations gathered on uncomplicated terms. I was worried that she'd have to bear all these changes for her daughter. Wouldn't she be worse off in her new home? No, it was impossible to complain about the way they were treated. They seemed to accept their arrival. There was Rick, his sister, and the servants. It's strange having servants at all. They seemed to take it naturally, as if it was meant to be. But still, now Miranda was in an unfamiliar environment and couldn't even play with her old friends. And of course, Kelly thought about what it would be like when it was over. After all, it was impossible that fate smiled so much, that once and for all. And that meant that she would probably have to get better and go back to her usual life. It will be possible to divorce Charles, and there was no doubt about it. It's gonna be long and hard. As for Rick's sister, she turned out just fine. And as shameful as it was to admit it, it was kind of a pushover. Kelly Slaga became a friend. They became close, especially since Kelly was fascinated by what Slaga was doing. In general, my dad wanted me to become a lawyer and not a fashion designer, the girl shared. On this cloudy day, Kelly was at her room, which is actually Led, who decided creative mess, more like a creative studio. The subject matter, however, was matter of fact. Clara was twirling around a mannequin with a crackle of fabric, figuring out, as it were, in whose zeal to copy the material on the dress. Kelly sat next to her in the gurney chair she trusted. It doesn't take long to get used to it. But I'm stubborn. I said I'd run away from home if I didn't, according to me, continued the girl. At this, Kelly shook her head boldly. She personally could not imagine how it is so generally possible to communicate with relatives, if in general you have a good relationship with them. She herself had always dreamed of having a family. Kelly pored over the sketches. It turns out that in half a year, the educated woman was to have a show in Rome. Not yet, of course, as part of the World Fashion Week, but it was already happening. According to Slaga's assurances, it was a start. I wanted to be a designer too. You did. Wow. Tell me why you didn't. I had to make a living, Kelly shrugged. And then she realized how ugly it was to insinuate that someone was rich. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I just didn't get a chance. Yeah, that's okay. We're in the middle of something. Maybe it's time to fulfill a dream. I don't get it. Kelly, looking at a few more sketches, here they were ruthlessly crossed out, and it seems were variations of what now no longer on paper, but in person tried to create a young fashion designer. Well, you can start learning now, answered so simply, as if the opportunity for this already lay. Ready only here is a hand outstretch. Understand, you probably have a talent, and that's a grain of happiness to miss out on in life. And if you don't do what you like, courage. She spoke beautifully, but of course, was cosmically far from the truth. After all, many, very many people are forced to do what they do not like, just to earn for themselves, and their relatives. Here, by the way, let's right now, the girl smiled and clapped her hands with her idea. I can, clarified Kelly, and when she nodded, in response drove her closer to the mannequin itself. I can't think of what to do. Right there, and she poked her finger at the mannequin's waistline and lower down the hip line. There has to be training here. I've tried 1,000 variations. It's all wrong. Here you go. She handed Kelly the pearl-headed pins. At first I wanted to refuse food. What does she know about it? But then I bit my lip and thought about it. Determined to get to work. Why not try it? For fun in the process did not interfere, silently watched. Ready, Kelly finally said. And as you can see, it worked. What she meant to say was that it turned out terribly. What else would you expect from an amateur? But then Clara showered her with compliments that it was original, fresh, and airy. And at the same time, the lines, as the fabric lay, turned out to be strict, perfectly capturing the essence of the mood of the flesh. She photographed the dress, went around it, shooting video, making it. This flew to Rome. What do you mean? It flew to Rome. Kelly Margaret, I sent to my teacher. The girl shrugged and gave me the name of a very famous designer. That it was the same one I did. I asked him for an answer. Does my friend have talent? Or should she look for another calling in life? But Kelly didn't understand how that was even possible, which is what she was doing. By the way, the fact that you learned to be a designer seamstress is a very good thing, because you understand the process of making clothes from the inside. Kelly didn't think about it in that way and only had to shake her head. Next, we talked not only about fashion, but also about the near future. Kelly noticed that her new friend had a very unusual, beautiful name, and she replied that it was just her mom, Rick's father's second wife, whom he took when the first one died of cancer, originally from Italy. That's where the name came from. And then it turned out that the day came very quickly when Kelly was to have surgery. The young woman was naturally worried and fell asleep under anesthesia. She was more sure that she was hopeless than the doctor said. But when she woke up, it turned out that the intervention was successful. And then, in the following days, it became clear that everything was even better than the doctors had originally planned. Kelly was on the mend. Of course, there was still a long rehabilitation process ahead. But still, the main thing was accomplished. Charles, by the way, during all this time with his wife practically did not communicate. He and Kelly called literally a couple times. How's it going? He didn't ask about her health. He only asked about Miranda because he'd been traveling so much for advice. Turns out he's doing just fine living away from his wife. And as Lisa relayed, he's not even sad. Unfortunately, he's been communicating more and more openly with that redhead from the first floor. Kelly, when she found out, didn't feel anything, but in the sense that she realized that her marriage to Charles had been built on a desperate desire to have a reliable, caring man around. It hadn't worked out that way. As fate had shown, love definitely never happened. She just didn't have the guts to admit it before, because she just didn't see any alternative to living alone. But now everything was changing, and Kelly felt more and more free. Lisa, in the time since Kelly had moved into the Smith house, had lived as she had before. Classes with students small their own joys. James, fortunately, as if to realize that marriage is not a joke matter, and it takes a lot of time to make that decision. But once discontent expressed, repeating the words of his mother that youth passes and that to create a family, it is better to think early. You twisted it like that. Lisa at the temple with her finger, rushing a girl into a relationship by insinuating that the girl is getting old. You know, honey, I'm going to think 100 more times after this that your candidacy with your mom on top of it is not the best option. James, blushing like a cancer. He apologized and even brought a bouquet of yellow roses. And yellow roses mean separation. I've heard of that, Lisa grumbled, but she took the bouquet. James was upset. I've known you too long, since the sandbox to be exact. Let's make a deal. If you're really counting on something serious, then just give me the time not to squeeze my soul out or the friendship we've had these years will start to, excuse me, disappear. James was in agreement. He agreed to everything now, but he was also determined that he would not back down. Because on the eve of the action you yourself brought, went to visit Cindy, and in the girl's room, the door was not very open. On the table noticed a bouquet of flowers, something lush like orchids. James didn't know about it, and he got suspicious, because there were no holidays at his beloved's house. So someone must have given them to her. Who? Wasn't it the rich man who took care of her friend? James wasn't afraid to lose, because it wouldn't mean anything to go against a man Lisa had known since childhood. But it still didn't feel right. He wanted Lisa to wear a wedding ring, as a married woman, and behave accordingly. Lisa herself was busy with something more important than thinking about whether it was time to get married. In the first place, she was watching her friend, and it seemed to her that Kelly might be a victim of something she couldn't quite understand. But it turned out that the wolf's interest was not simple, all this care. And on top of that, Lisa was a little jealous of her friend Clara. Up until now, in fact, she was the only one Lisa had been close friends with Kelly. And the appearance of a new character in the little company was unsettling. And even more so, she didn't want Kelly to fall under any bad influence. One day Lisa was rushing to class with that very student. A student whose parents had rejected her for being late, but had changed their minds. Lisa was triumphant. She was better than that. She hurried through the city, thinking that she should definitely stop by Kelly's to see how she was recovering from surgery. And suddenly, passing by the summer veranda, almost all in the city clothes they are already on it remained hidden, stretched instead of the walls of the canvas of coffee color. She heard a familiar voice. Rick was talking to someone, and Kelly's name sounded. The girl stopped on this side of the end adjacent to the building's summer veranda. There were hardly any passers-by, but judging by the sounds, the talkers were sitting at the nearest table. Are the papers ready? Don't worry, a sample contract. I'll send you out tomorrow. What are our people saying? Well, it's a tricky situation, but I think we should take control of the main thing. From what I've heard, then it became clear that Rick met with his lawyer, and they talked about the fact that, it turns out, Miranda is not just Mason's daughter, but also his heir by law. Since Mason had gotten ownership of a not insignificant share of the family business from her father, it seemed to be about a lot of money. But the real shocker was something else. It turned out that Rick was concerned that Kelly, as the daughter's representative, could take over the business. He had no intention of letting that happen, and his plan was such that Lisa became furious and finally stopped respecting the man altogether. A real monster in the guise of a man, whom she had already as stupid as dollars. This man was already starting to, she liked, and those flowers he sent made her heart tingle. Hearing enough, and fearing that I here will find the exit from the summer veranda was literally a meter away from where Lisa was lurking, and she decided to leave, and realized, by the way, that she was late again. Again, she sighed, stopped, dialed the number of the student's parents, and not wanting to listen to compliments, told herself she wasn't coming. Circumstances forced it. They'd promised to leave a negative review on all resources. Lisa, with the phone on the ground, did not throw. Here, and that's Rick's fault, too, by the way. I got distracted by my conspiracy. How much did she hate him at that moment? But she got a grip. She had to talk to Kelly soon. Only it was only coming out that it could only be done later, because there was a new class in 3 o'clock, and to let herself lose this student. Lisa couldn't at all. Then Grandma Lisa's mom called. Lisa was not feeling well. Her heart was not up to the ambulance. But naturally the girl hurried home. And so it turned out that it was possible to get to the friend only the next day. And of course, I wanted to talk about everything on the phone. Lisa, I wanted to call you myself and demand that you come. My friend was in surprisingly good spirits, and somehow it seemed to Cindy that it wasn't just about her getting better. It's been an amazing day. Can you believe Miranda said she likes math? Rick suggested a really good tutor. Turns out Miranda's aptitude just needed a different approach. Lisa was in agreement with this until she started tutoring the girl in Russian. She never got higher than a B. Apparently, Miranda belonged to those kids who need a special way of presenting a topic that is difficult to learn. And they're already better will go the girl would certainly be pleased with the success of a young student. We were about to have a serious conversation on a completely different topic, after which perhaps, only now, as emotions had subsided, Lisa thought about the fact that by telling everything to Kelly could cross her all so prosperous present. But it was impossible to keep quiet about it, because then she would be in great danger, and Miranda would be in danger too. Lisa had already taken a breath of air into her chest to start throwing herself into the thick of it. Here, they were suddenly interrupted. Clara burst into the room as a positive hurricane. "Dad's here with a surprise. Just now he called. He's on his way." "Yay." Smiling brightly, she jumped up to Kelly and took her hand. "You need to get changed right away," she nodded, hinting at the house dress, a funny drawing of a mouse. Lisa was a little in shock. The situation was compounding into a disaster already, turning right before her eyes. She had time to learn that Jacob Smith was, in fact, the real master of the entire family business empire. It was he, not Rick, who made the key decisions, which meant Lisa realized she had to act decisively. "Where are you going?" Ockled her as she hurried to the door. "Kelly, I need to ask Rick something urgent." She dropped what she had in mind. Now she could only hope they were rich people who had no conscience or decency left, would listen to her, and if they didn't, Lisa hadn't decided what to do in that case. But she had no doubt that she wouldn't let her friend get hurt. After all, the operation had already been done, and successfully. So Kelly would be less dependent on this family. Damn it. "Where's Rick?" The maid caught her in the hallway. "He's in the study." But Jacob ordered, not listening to anyone, rushed further into the study, flew into it without knocking, without invitation. The dare of a puppy. The tall, gray-haired man slapped the man standing in front of him, Rick, with a hard swing. Lisa froze and stepped over the threshold. Ouch. Immediately it was clear the scene was clearly not for strangers' eyes. The men turned to her in sync. The one who was apparently Jacob, the head of the family, looked unhappy to have interrupted a thorough conversation with a guilty son. Rick, confused, they could see that they were very uncomfortable to be seen in this light. "I told you not to bother. Who the hell are you?" Coolly threw the man. Lisa girl at first wanted to apologize and go out, but realized that this man, his weakness immediately smells, and therefore with him to deal with. How scary, as if the wolf took human form and is now looking into the soul, thinking about attack or wait. "I'm Kelly's friend," she clarified, and stepped boldly forward. "I know everything. I know what you're up to." That's how the role of the older man bent. He grinned. "How interesting." Interesting. Lisa, who was no longer afraid at all, erupted. And she said everything she thought about Rick and Rick's sinister plan. And then something began to dawn on her. She suddenly, as she considered the emotions, Rick's father's anger, confusion, and vulnerability. And she even thought that if you began to be a gray-haired man gesturing for silence. Lawyers, thankfully, work for me, not him. And then last night I got the curious news that my own son had decided to follow in his brother's footsteps. Rick, tell me, did you think I wouldn't find out anything at all seriously? Like I didn't know you were coming? Yeah, your accounts are kind of on lockdown, by the way. What did I explain? Well, try me, but later. In the meantime, I must apologize to this lovely girl. He turned to Cindy again. I'm sorry the case was delayed. I should have dropped it and come down here. Once I found out I had a granddaughter. Why don't you sit down? We need to have a serious talk. Cindy was beginning to think that everything that was happening was not real, that she had become the heroine of a movie, a drama, and a thriller. The questions were finally answered. Lisa's panic and fear for her friend was justified. It turned out that Rick was planning to fall in love with Kelly and marry her, as well as adopt Miranda. Thus, he would have full power over the little girl heir to his brother's fortune. And what's more, Jacob Smith stated in almost direct text that his son had no intention of treating Kelly well and with care. Apparently, he wanted her on a purely formal basis. Dad, but I wouldn't. Rick started to start, but his father gave him a look that made him hesitate and shut up. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have interrupted. You're not supposed to breathe without my permission now. I'm sure you'd make the poor girl's life a living hell. After everything your brother's done. Does that sound like atonement for his sins? I'm afraid I was wrong. You and he are too much alike. It's been decided. I'll transfer the shares to Clara. What can't you do? She refused to enter the family business, but she's always been honest. Technically, she can hold the second largest stake after mine. I can't really trust you with it. Look, this is all very important, but it's for you to try and get Lisa's attention back. What about Kelly? You realize she can't now. What are you talking about? The girl. Formally, but somehow it sounded not rude, not dismissive, more trusting, patronizing. Addressed her Jacob. Do you really want your friend to go back to her old life in a poor apartment where that man is waiting for her? I don't believe in fate. I just know that I have a granddaughter, and I don't intend to leave her to her fate. Yes, she's the heir to a great fortune. It just so happens. Technically, everything Mason owned went to me as his father, but Miranda is entitled to it, and always has been. And I intend to make sure the girl takes advantage of every opportunity that comes her way. She's not only your friend's daughter, she's my own blood. But Lisa began, but faded under the strange look in Korea's eyes. What Rick was up to must not be known to anyone. Kelly, there is no need to know. Let her life be more peaceful after everything. I agree. I'm bringing her up to speed myself, personally making sure that no one and nothing is threatened now. And then Lisa asked the question that had plagued her ever since she learned that Rick was plotting a mercantile marriage to her best friend. Why did you send me flowers? Why did you act like you liked me? Lisa, look, I know what I did was selfish, mean. So can we talk in private? No, you talk here. I've had enough of your secrets. Besides, I'm really interested to hear about your adventures, you know. Father Rick clearly enjoyed the helpless submission of a son who depended on him for everything. He'd been brought up so that rebellion, though it happened, was quelled quickly. Cindy felt even a little sorry for Rick. He seemed so brutally fair, but not sorry enough to feel anything like disgust for him and a desire to get away from his company as soon as possible. Yeah, I was thinking that marriage to Kelly would be a formality. She'd have social status. She wouldn't need anything. And with you, you wanted to make me your mistress. I've never met a man like that before. You're just, because Rick's father was here. After all, I'm so sorry I let myself get weak and thought it was sincere. So, you know, time is running out. And Jacob got up from his chair. I think I need to go see Kelly and my granddaughter. Lisa was overwhelmed with emotion. She found the strength to curb them. She realized that right now her best friend was essentially at a crossroads. She could fall back, because even getting her health back would be difficult. Or could she actually take advantage of all that Jacob Smith was offering? She could easily just divorce Charles. And Miranda, the girl, could get a good start in life. So Lisa swore to herself. She kept the dark secret safe. She also believed it was just a gut feeling that Jacob Smith is another complicated and cruel man who lives by his own set of rules. But he wouldn't hurt Kelly and Miranda. Kelly met Jacob. She liked him immediately. Later, she confided in Lisa that it was as if she could sense in him the father figure she never had. Miranda was wary of the serious uncle at first, but then agreed to call him Grandpa. And then, when he gave her a marvelous plush giraffe and a box of chocolate-covered raspberries, she even dared to ask that if she got a grandfather, couldn't her daddy magically appear as well? And Jacob wondered. He could, of course, introduce Kelly to several worthy young men and naturally belong to his circle. But he promised himself to give it some serious thought. Rick for two reasons. To keep him out of the way and for educational purposes, Jacob had sent him to the other side of the country to deal with a local problem branch of one of the family business branches. Clara took the news about the transfer of her shareholding as Jacob expected. She fought back with all her might, but then resigned herself to the fact that there was no hiding from the family business. However, she had reason to rejoice. The designer to whom she sent a photo of Kelly's dress said that this girl definitely has talent. Kelly was in a pleasant shock from such news. But the idea that maybe she could realize her dream and do what she likes in life was already beckoning, especially since earnings could be taken care of for now. And Jacob assured her that all the business of transferring the Mason property to Miranda had already been started by his lawyers, and naturally everything would be held in trust. And the little girl and her mother, as they call it, could only skim the cream. Lisa was happy with the way things were lining up, and it seemed she had finally gotten off the carousel of caregiving, albeit the care of her best friend, but it was someone else's life, while her own seemed to be on pause, and now it was time for a change. One evening, Lisa herself called James and told him they needed to meet, despite the increasingly consuming world around them. Fall. The weather was nice, warm. The couple walked slowly down the alley, rustling the leaves. "Do you still want us to get married?" she asked. James stopped, caught her by the shoulders, looked her in the eyes so hard it was clear. "I guess I agree. No offense, but we've been friends for so many years. It's not easy to move on to new ones like this. I'll try. Let's just take it slow. Let's just have a nice romance first. I also want us to learn to understand each other better. Otherwise, it'll be a scandal. Does that suit you?" Maybe not. It was not worth talking about love and the future at all, but Lisa didn't know any other way. James smiled and nodded. "I know I'm not perfect, but I'm glad you're giving me a chance. I'll do whatever it takes to make us happy."